All right, sample 10 is the centered zipper. So you have the sample fabric, you cut the large piece and then cut it right down the middle. Take it over to the serger. This will be infinitely easier if you do this while it's still a loose piece. So serge the edges that were just cut, the two edges right there, and flop those back on top of each other. And that's where you're going to make a seam at 5/8 of an inch. Here's the zipper. And when you actually get to the part of inserting the zipper, you'll need your zipper foot. Zipper foot is foot number 4. And you can see it's a real skinny little thing. We'll get to that in just a minute. So first off, we have to mark how long this zipper is into the opening that it's going into. From the top of the zipper, that stop right there, that piece of metal, needs to be 5/8 of an inch because my seam is coming along. So there's 5/8 of an inch. The width of your seam gauge is 5/8. So you can see those little pokey things of your zipper zigzag hanging up over the top edge. So I usually use the bottom of those, the valleys of those zigzag things to mark the top. So hang that over until you can just see the valley right there. That's where the zipper needs to end up. So come down here to the bottom, and the critical point is that stop at the bottom of the zipper, and that's what you need to mark. So there it is right there. I'm just going to put a pin right here. So up here is where the zipper is going to go, and down here would be the rest of the seam. Like if this were a skirt, this would be the back seam, and then where the zipper goes in. Pants in the front, that would be the front area, and then this would actually curve away and go to the crotch. But for the sample, it's straight. That's going to make it easier for you. So line up those edges, and we'll sew them at 5/8 of an inch. I'll show you that. Alrighty, so down below where this regular seam's just coming up, center back seam, if this were pants or side seam or on a skirt or pants, then just keep it at 5/8. Make sure it's a good 5/8. This is one time that you don't ever want to skimp, because you need the seam allowance is what your zipper is getting attached to, and if you make that too skinny, then this whole operation won't work right from the start. So as soon as I get to where the bottom of my zipper is, where I marked where that stop was, and I don't want to sew over the pin, so I'm just going to pull it off so it's just to the side. I don't want to sew over it. As soon as I get to exactly where it is, I'm going to back stitch a couple of stitches and go back to where it was, and change your stitch length. Right now I'm at regulation stitch 2.5, so I'm going to put in a stitch that's going to get unpicked later, and it's ever so much easier to unpick a bigger stitch. So just make that a bigger stitch. 3032 is what I have it on, somewhere in that neighborhood, and finish coming up the rest of the way with that basting stitch. When I get to the top, this is going to get a lot of wear and tear, so I'm going to back stitch like 2 stitches, not very much, but just enough to make it a titch more secure. So I have my stitches below its regulation stitch, a tiny little back stitch, and then a basting stitch all the rest of the way up to there. So I'm going to come over and get that pressed. All right, so here's the seam that I just sewed, and this is a handy little trick. You're going to unpick all this stitch right here after the zipper has been inserted to make it easy to know where that is, where it changed from the basting stitch to my reinforcement stitch of back stitching. I'm going to unpick that, just pop a stitch right there and pop the stitch on the other side that's right at the reinforcement. When I pull these strings out, they'll pull out and they'll stop, and they won't interfere and try to undo my reinforcement stitch right there. If I didn't do that reinforcement stitch right there, when I finish my zipper and it's done on this side, those stitches start pulling out because they weren't secured. So there's that stitch, and I'm just going to open this out and totally give it a flat press. Okay, so here's my zipper now. And when you lay this down, make sure that the zipper tab is facing the fabric, because if you put it in this side, obviously this is the wrong side and the zipper tab is facing the wrong way. When you're all done, it has to face to the outside world. So put this down, match it back up with those little mountain peaks up near the, just poking over the top right there, and then coming down the middle. So the zipper teeth need to be dead center, right on top of the seam. Really, really, really important. And make sure that that tab that's pulling the zipper, that it's pointing up, right there. A zipper, let me show you the right. A zipper has a lock on it. If that tab is down, my zipper is locked. It helps to prevent embarrassing accidents in your fly and other important zippered areas, because if the tab is down, that zipper won't go anywhere. If the tab is up, however, then just a little push and I can get that zipper to come open again. But if it's down, see, if I push on that, nothing's happening. But I want the little handy feature of being able to push it down at my last step coming up. Excuse me. All right, so back to this. Get it centered back on there. Center that right on the tab, or the teeth right on the seam allowance. I'm going to pin this just to the seam allowance. See, just the seam allowance, not to my fashion fabric. Okay. Okay, back to the machine. I'll show you how to do this. All right, so put on the zipper foot. And a very important thing to notice about the zipper foot is if I just tried to sew, there's my needle, there's my foot, I'm going to break my needle. The zipper foot only has places for the needles out on the sides. So you have to move the needle, and needle position is right up here. This little arrow to this side and arrow to this side. If you watch on the screen right there, there it's when it's centered, and I need to put it over here. When you sew it with the zipper foot on the zippers, your needle is always, always, always between the foot and the zipper. So here's my zipper, here's my foot, my needle's here. It would be wrong to put the needle over here and try to sew on this side, because here's my needle, here's my foot, here's my zipper. So, excuse me, I've got to be on this side. So I am just sewing the zipper tape to the seam allowance. It is just the seam allowance. The whole fashion fabric is out here, totally out of the way. There's only one layer of fabric right there. And I'm still on basting stitch, and that's totally okay. On my zipper itself, you want to kind of keep this as a guideline. Most zippers, if you can see this, when they wove the tape over here, there's these little lines. So there's kind of a fat line right here, and I want to stay to that side of it so that it won't interfere with my actual stitching or the operation of the zipper if I get too close later on. Can't take those off now that I'm past them. So keep that zipper right down the middle of the teeth. And another thing, when you're sewing with zippers, you always start at the bottom of the zipper and go to the top of the zipper. So I wouldn't turn this around and start at the top here and sew down to here, because that torques the zipper. As you go down this side, that makes the zipper want to kind of be off skewed off. So I want to do it, I put it this way on this side, so I want to start on this side and go this way on this side. So to do the other side, expose just the seam allowance, and hopefully I'm going right down. Now look what happens on my needle and my foot now that I'm on the other side of the zipper. So I need to move that all the way over to the other side of the zipper foot. And I am still on basting stitch, and that is totally okay, because all I'm doing right now is securing this zipper, holding it down. So the next step will be breeze. All right, so you can see that I have not sewn anything to the front side yet. All I've done is put my zipper onto the seam allowances. Alrighty. Oh, where's my scissors? Right there. I'm going to trim all these threads off so it doesn't get ugly. Oh, I'm trying to sew this later. Alright, now I can go to the right side and find the bottom of my zipper. I'm going to poke this through to this side. Okay, that's where the bottom of my zipper is, and my stop, and that's a little piece of metal. If I hit that with the needle, it will break my needle. So I'm making sure that I am not by that metal. I can either sew right below it or I can sew right above it. If I go right above it, I'm actually sewing through the zipper teeth, which is fine. They're nylon and nothing it won't break the needles. Okay, so actually I need to transfer a pin to this side. So that's the bottom of my zipper. Okay, I guess I could do this side since my needle's on this side. Now my pin's facing the wrong way. Okay, right there. Okay, so I have to change my stitch length back to regulation stitch. So I go back to 2.5, and I want to get my needle right into the seam allowance and bury it. Let my head get in the way. Okay, can you see that? That the needle is right in the seam allowance, right dead center. Okay, now at this point, I have a couple of decisions I can make, because I need to sew straight, but I can't see my stitch plate anymore. So how do I know how far away I am from my seam and to keep this straight? You have a couple of choices. One is, sorry, get across in front of you here. One is this handy dandy, it's called a quilt bar, and I'll show you. You'll measure 1/4 of an inch. So I know, that wasn't a good 4th. Where's the 1/4 of an inch? Where 1/4 of an inch is, and I sew 1, 2, looks like about 3 stitches, so that I've gone 1/4 of an inch. Then I can put the quilt bar in that hole in the back of my zipper foot and tighten the screw. Not quite liking where it's at. Okay, I like that better. And then just keep the quilt bar coming right up the seam right there, and then I know that I'm 1/4 of an inch away from the teeth of my zipper. And again, notice that my needle is right here, my foot is over here, and my zipper's over here. So the needle's always in the middle position. And let's come up to the top. When you get to the top, you've got the bump of your zipper tab. When you do the first side, it usually will let you ride up and over it. And you can back stitch up here, because this is going to be in a seam allowance later. So there's one side. And notice that I left a long string, and I did not back stitch at the beginning. So now I have to do the other side. So I have to swap my needle, get it over on the other side, and do it from the other direction. So this, it ends up being upside down, but that's okay. It serves the purpose. I have to put the needle down exactly where I started. You might not be able to see this really good at that angle, but I'm just going to hit that exact same hole where I started before. And I took 3 stitches, I think, before. 1, 2, 3. Now I'm going to pivot and go this way. So I'm just going to keep that bar hovering right over the center line right there. And I've got these 2 long stitches, long threads, and keep those out of the way. And now you're going to sew up the other side. Another thing you can do to keep the stitching really straight is to get a piece of tape, 1/2 inch wide Scotch tape, and just come up, put it over this seam right here, and then use the Scotch tape as your guideline. Okay, when we went on this side, the tab, the big fat tab at the top of the zipper, it was able to push out of the way and go into all this space that I had right here. But now that this side is sewn down, there's no place for it to do that. So I'm going to open this seam up and lift the presser foot up. That's why I wanted that tab to be on the up position, because I can unpick my zipper down a few stitches and push that tab down, 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 get it clear down there, out of the way. Bring that back, put the presser foot back down, and then finish sewing up to the top. Back stitch. Okay, so that's a centered zipper. Now I have these tails here at the bottom. Let me show you how you take care of those. So we'll back over here. All right, so I have long threads on this side, my top thread, and these are my bobbin threads on the back. And this is easy to see when you have 2 colors of thread like this. It should have a different color than the same color as the zipper. That's my mistake. But you can see when I yank on these threads, I'm starting to pull the needle thread to the back side. So I just grab that loop of the needle thread and bring it through on the other side. Find the loop of the needle thread and pull that up. So those needle threads are gone off the back side or the front side, and now they're totally on the back side. So I just hang on to all my threads, at least 2 of them. I just do this all at once because it makes my life easier, and just tie a nice square knot. Right over left, left over right. Don't know if I did left over right, so I'll do it this way this time. And just give yourself a nice tight knot. Cut that off to around 1/2 inch. Just something that's not going to get caught in the zipper. And then in real life, you would pull all these threads out that were the basting stitch that you put in that first stitch. But because your TA needs to see your lovely work, you can unpick it, but don't unpick it all the way down. She just needs to see that it was basted shut when you first started that. So that is a centered zipper. So when it's done, it's just hiding right there behind the lips. Each lip is 1/4 inch big. Okay, that's done.